I also have another company, a storage and logistics company in the greater Boston area.
I remember my first hire being an overseas hire, and I felt like that was kind of the gateway drug in terms of like getting into the actual hiring and figuring out leverage and how other people can help you kind of scale up your operations.
Can they perform the work we need them to perform to provide results for our customers? Whoever gets the most leverage off of the current cost structure they have without sacrificing the customer experience, like that's what makes you a good operator.
They're really good, so we can't afford to lose them.
You got to build the systems where the average person can do really, really well in those systems.
You can't just necessarily hire someone and have them be amazing from day one. Good morning, man. How you doing on Monday?
Good, man. Happy to be here, Connor.
Yeah, happy to have you. So I'm definitely excited to have this podcast going. You are guest number 3 here at this point. And the big thing that I've quickly realized talking to everyone from like B2B SaaS founders to small indie entrepreneurs who are only hiring overseas is like everyone has a different hiring strategy. They have a different goal in terms of how big they want their team to be. So I'd love to start today's show by just having you introduce yourself, hit them with all the brags, talk about what Brightline Social is and what you're all about and kind of where your team is at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have experience hiring a couple different ways. So one through Brightline, worked with primarily overseas talent, which is Brightline was it's a SEO and inbound consulting agency. So I rolled that into Bold SEO in partnership with Nick Huber. And I also have another company that's completely different, a storage and logistics company in the greater Boston area. And so with that, we actually do a lot of let's call it local and onshore hiring, but specifically local to greater Boston area. So two completely different dynamics between the overseas hiring, which we do a lot of at Bold, and the onshore hiring. So I kind of get to see this from both angles. I know the offshore hiring is been really hot lately, but I think onshore hiring is really important as well. And if you can get them to work together, I think you can get some really interesting efficiencies on your team.
Absolutely. I mean, even from the storage stuff that we're doing as well, we have overseas hires, we have back end US hires, we have hires who are just local to the area that we own the property in. And all three run the gambit in terms of like the quality, the cost, the level of responsiveness that you can get. Most people that are probably listening to this right now run a small business in some way or another. And I would say I remember my first hire being an overseas hire, and I felt like that was kind of the gateway drug in terms of like getting into the actual hiring and figuring out leverage and how other people can help you kind of scale up your operations. What was your first hire, whether it was at Brightline prior to Bold or for the operations business that you're running today?
Hire we ever made that I ever made in my life is we used to hire college students on campus to distribute flyers and stuff for us for our storage business. And that was really interesting because if you think about what motivates a college student is very different than what motivates somebody who has a wife or a husband and kids or whatever. And so, in that game, it was how can we get them to do something where there's a little bit of guaranteed pay. So I think a lot of people go into hiring, especially young people like students or whatever, and they assume like, oh, they would love to make a commission. It's like everybody wants to make commission to get that extra leverage up their work, but I think it's incredibly undervalued to actually just pay somebody to do something for you. And so we tried a lot early on to say, hey, if you put these flyers out for every sign up, you'll get $20 or whatever, and if you get 200 sign-ups, like you're going to make all this money. And the kids would do it for like 2 hours. And then, it's like you get a text from your friend. And it's like, well, they're not paying me anyway. So I don't really feel that bad. Where if you're paying someone, it kind of creates this, I guess, mutual sense of obligation where it's like, hey, I'm paying you to do something. And then you can get this additional leverage on top of it. So that was something we learned early on is I don't really have any interest in hiring what I would call commission only employees because I've never seen it work well for myself. And most other people I talk to, it doesn't work that well. It's a really special type of person who will work for commission only and like put in the work consistently over a period of time before it pays off for them. So that was a lesson I took away early is like when I hire people, I'm always looking to pay them. Now that leads to, you can probably have less people, but to me, they're creating that mutual sense of obligation. I owe you money and you owe me work. And then if we direct those efforts properly with the right people, it should create more that everybody benefits from as well. But that was a tough
I
lesson.
No, I completely agree. I think one of the things that we kind of learned the hard way early on in the storage business was we would pay people pretty well, like from an hourly rate standpoint. We own a lot of storage properties in like lower income areas. And so I'm paying somebody $30 an hour to go by, sweep out a unit, turn it over, make sure trash is picked up around. And it got to a point where, people would jump at the opportunity right away and then quickly realized, well, all right, there's only 3 hours of work for me to do here every single week because it's not a full-time job. And then, $30 an hour sounds great, but $90 a week to have to drive out to a place and have it kind of take up some mind share, like it's not paying the bills. And so something that we actually started doing was implementing a basic policy of, all right, we're going to pay you $30 an hour, but we're going to guarantee 5 hours a week. And some weeks there are 8 hours of work. Some weeks, we need you out there meeting a contractor, meeting a tenant for some reason. Like there are weeks that it can scale up. But if you go out there and you drive out and it's, hey, I'm going to brush off the sidewalk and it's an hour worth of work, you're still going to get paid for 5 hours, which makes it actually like a little bit more worth their while and still doesn't really break the bank for us compared to hiring a full-time employee.
Yeah, there's something about the show of good faith to offer someone like a minimum. It just creates a stronger, hey, we know at a minimum what this engagement looks like. I think that's really important. And I think a lot of first time hiring people only think about hiring in terms of how it influences their cost structure, not how it influences like what type of work you're going to get, or even more importantly, what type of reliability you're going to get, right? To your point, 3 hours a week, hey, I got to fill the other 37, right? But if you commit 5 to me, I know that, okay, I know I'm probably not going to have 40, but I know I have some like minimum baseline that helps me budget my life and budget my time. So yeah, I think it's really important. I like that strategy.
And so the other thing that I wanted to talk about today was over at Bold. So you guys are obviously hiring a lot of overseas hires, which I think is really helpful from an agency standpoint. You can scale up much more efficiently. Your cost structure is much lower, which is fantastic. How do you think about when to hire somebody stateside versus overseas?
Yeah, so I think in a business like Bold, which is an inbound agency, right? It really comes down to skills on one side. Can they perform the work we need them to perform to provide results for our customers? But in the agency business, I think almost as important as results is translating those results for your customers, but also giving them a pleasant experience. So that kind of breaks down into a few different hires. So, on the skill side, there's certain parts of the world where, like Eastern Europe, for example, they're really strong developer and SEO. So those skills are usually kind of aligned on the marketing side, where maybe a creative person is not as focused on technical stuff. We need content. Most of our customers are in the US, so we need like fluent English writing that also ticks the boxes on SEO. So we need people, on the back end that can do those types of things. On the front end, we're looking for people that can create videos, have charisma, can understand what push up on a keyword or more traffic translates into in a business sense. So you really need a business mind on the front end to talk to customers because people want results translated into business terms. But on the back end, you need people that can deliver the results. So we really have to figure out like what are the skills in this role? And obviously people from America typically speak the best American English. So usually front-facing customer roles will look to be onshore. But on the back end, I think, yeah, the US dollar goes further in a place like Serbia, but the SEO talent is just as good, if not better, than you're going to get here in the US. So I think it's understanding your business, understanding your customers. It allows you to pick and choose where you can put onshore versus offshore and still provide a great experience and the results for your customers. So that's really how I'm thinking about it when I think from an org chart level.
Yeah, I like that. I think one thing that we tried on these, again, going back to the self-storage front, was we have tried, post-grad college kids from an acquisition analyst side where they're just making cold calls, they're talking to owners and, they're getting them excited. We're getting revenue numbers back, we're getting unit mixes, and that's worked really well for us. We've also tried to offshore it and calling Texas self-storage owners with maybe a slightly overseas accent doesn't fly at all. It's an immediate hang up. Are there any, I mean, you kind of mentioned it here a little bit just based on the technical versus kind of customer facing side, but are there any roles where you've tried to offshore them and after doing so, you'd be like, you've essentially come to the conclusion of, no, something I think that hiring somebody stateside for this is the right move?
So I think about it less in terms of like, let's say a customer facing front role, which, what would that look like? Okay, I want you to send, every week I want you to send a 5-minute Loom video to the customer saying, hey, here's what we did, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's some results, here's what it means for your business. So I think about it less in terms of are they onshore or offshore for that, but more in terms of one, you know, do they have a business mind, right? Can they translate those results without me or somebody on my team having to do it for them? At scale, that's tough to do. It's like I can't translate, 60, 70 customers results into business terms. The other thing would be, can they communicate in the language that our customers expect communication in clear enough? So when I think about onshore, that might mean US, but we have team members from South Africa who are amazing, and customers love them, and they do a really good job of translating results and speaking clearly. We've worked with folks from the UK. Obviously, that's pretty close, probably as close as you're going to get to Native American English. And so it's yeah, that's really how I'm thinking about it.
And I think the other thing that's really interesting, especially from the agency perspective. So how big is Bold right now, like in terms of generally employee count?
Yeah, about 9 to 10 team members at the moment.
So how are you thinking about it from a hiring plan standpoint, where like, I also we run an e-commerce business and we can double the business tomorrow and I'm not necessarily going to be doubling my team. Whereas
Yeah.
I would presume if you guys double your business, you double your annual sales, you will absolutely have to be doubling your team because the team, the people are the product, and that's kind of what the customers are paying for. So how does a hiring plan work for an agency?
Yeah, it's a great question. Spent a lot of time thinking about this lately. And so I think it's twofold. One, yeah, in a business like an agency, you're gonna have to add more folks as you grow, right? Like you can only manage so many accounts yourself. A salesperson can only take so many calls, as opposed to e-commerce. Like we can scale ads and we can get sales in our sleep. It typically doesn't work that way in agencies at scale. But so I think it's a combination of like being a really good operator, and how I define a really good operator is whoever gets the most leverage off of the current cost structure they have without sacrificing the customer experience. Like that's what makes you a good operator. I think the second piece of that is knowing when that's about to break. And so you need to have your hand on the pulse of, hey, we've gotten 4 emails from customers this week saying they haven't heard from us enough. It's like, hey, that things are about to break. Or if you survey 5 random customers and they're like, no, I love the communication. It's like, okay, can each person take another 2 accounts? And then we're getting more leverage without adding additional cost. Or maybe you're adding costs more expensively. Hey, we're willing to up the salaries of these workers by $500 or $1,000 a month if they're willing to handle 3 to 4 more accounts. And so that might be cheaper than adding 3 new full employees or something. So I think it's a little bit of math, it's a little bit of feel, and it's a little bit of just kind of understanding your own business and your customers and like what they expect from you. So I think it's like some sort of there's some sort of equation that I think is like largely gut feel, and if something's about to break, it's like, hey, I've got to be out in front of this, and I've got to add people before that happens. So
Yeah,
that's
and
how I look at it.
I also think from like when you onboard an employee standpoint, understanding like you guys have been in business long enough to understand, okay, the typical account manager can manage X number of clients. The typical SEO strategist can handle Y number of backlinks and Z number of blog posts per month. And so you probably start to set KPIs generally, and then I would imagine it's somewhat of a math formula from there. Onboard a new client.
Yeah.
Client needs this from an expectation standpoint. We have capacity for that. Let me go and make sure that we're successfully executing that for the client before we hire anyone else.
Yeah, totally. And that's the math piece of it. And then I think the gut feel piece of it is who, from a literal personnel standpoint, is here right now. What type of people are they, or what type of person is the person in X role? Or hey, do I think this person could leave? Like, that's another way to think about hiring too, is adding more people is like insurance against your operations and how they currently run. If you are overly exposed to one person, like, in a physical business, we might call that key man risk. It's like, oh, if the ops manager leaves, like nobody else knows like the customer's phone numbers or something. And you see that in small business a lot. And so, you do want to think about what would happen if, things happen in life to people, like bad things. Also people leave and want to go work a different job or something, which is their right. And so you need to have insurance against that by having, other people who know what's going on. And that's like having other people, also having systems. And something we focused on a lot at Bold and with my storage company is just like centralizing everything into a database. It's like, hey, you're not texting customers from your personal cell phone number. Like that's happening through our Grasshopper, which is the phone app we use. It's like, so we need to be able to take over those comms if you just decide you don't like us one day. So, I think that's
Completely
really
agreed.
important. And that's a lesson, by the way, that I think everybody learns the hard way, right? It's like, oh, who has, our big customer's phone number? It's like,
No, I completely agree 100%. There was a lot of stuff going on back with our operations manager of texting from personal cell phones. And then, we knew that we were going to start partying with her at one point. So we hired somebody overseas. She got ramped up in 3 months. And then it kind of, to your point, gave us that insurance policy of fantastic. One person leaves now. The entire business isn't just one big question mark. We have documentation. We have human capital that understands the processes and all of that stuff. So no, I completely agree.
yeah,
As far as like, speaking of kind of key man risk, I feel like key man risk also comes as a partial byproduct of having kind of a really good employee. You can get rid of a little bit of it with systems and operations and ensuring that like everything's well documented and their brain is like a living documentation in some Notion, Wiki, whatever. But also like people tend to say, oh, they're really good, so we can't afford to lose them. I would love to get a better understanding of like who that is on your team. Like, do you have an employee where if I'm like, who is the most important person over at Bold right now that you're like, oh, that person's great? And then I'd love to get a better understanding of like how you hire them and how you can find more people like them.
yeah. So I would say that the person right now at Bold that I think is just the most important is a sales guy we have, Reagan. And he has a natural ability to sell. So I hired him. He actually was the little brother of one of my friends from college. And so, he wanted to start his own agency like maybe a year and a half ago. So I just talked to him. And then, this was kind of shaping up at Bold. And I'm like, hey, man, this is a perfect opportunity. And so, like, why is he great? One, he's just like totally willing to learn, totally coachable. And something that he does that I think is crazy is like, he's great 99% of the time, like everybody else. We drop the ball sometimes on something. And if he does that, he's the first to like take accountability, not only within the team, but to the customer, which is just, it's actually a really hard trait to find, is people who can be humble enough to just be like, hey, I messed up. And then nobody really cares if you're willing to say that. And then I think the other thing he does great is he's like really into and willing to learn about our service and how we can make it better and be cutting edge. So when he's doing sales calls, I think his research really shines through. As far as finding more like him, man, I would love to. Like, I think that's the hard part, right? It's like you find these and you coach people to be really good, and it's like there's some sort of like natural ability that people have that might make them like an A player versus a B player. So I think what you want to do, or what at least what I try to do, is you got to build the systems where the average person can do really, really well in those systems. But then if you do get a rock star in those systems, that it's just like boom, gasoline compared to what anybody else can do. So that's what I'm really focused on, is I'm not expecting that I'm gonna be able to find 10 Reagans. So I'm like, all right, what do we need to do that, like, Reagan times 0.85 can close deals, and so it's I think it's
100%.
again back on us as operators. But I mean, if we could find and replicate Reagan's, like that would also be great.
Yeah, I think that there's a very large intangible give a shit factor where
Yeah.
some people look at this as this is my job, 5 o'clock hits, I'm off. Other people, such as Reagan, it sounds like really wants to probably start his own thing one day. And so understanding and like the craft of how to scale the agency, all of that with you guys, I think is probably his learning ground to be able to get paid while getting ready to do his own thing, if I had to speculate. And then I think the other thing too, it sounds like he's young. Is he post grad, like just out of college?
About 24.
Say again.
He's 24.
So I think that's the other thing I've learned too. I mean, like, let's just take it back to my own personal anecdote. Like, we have, an acquisition specialist, acquisition associate on the Atlas team, and he is a beast. He's also never worked another real, like, commercial real estate job before. We hired three other people who all have more experience than him, and they all came in with what I would call some level of entitlement, laziness, slash, uh, like, just bad habits, honestly. And I don't think it's their fault. I think that honestly, like, it was this is how we did it in my last job, so this is how I'm doing it now type of thing. And I think with a case like Reagan, or like really some post grad people, if you can get lucky or find a system to recognize that top give a shit level talent early on, and then be able to instill them the habits and the things that are, quote, normal to you or normal for an A player. I think that you could probably produce more of them, but it does take a little bit more on the training side. Like, you can't just necessarily hire someone and have them be amazing from day one.
I think the other piece of that too is getting people who want to work in a small entrepreneurial environment. Like, not everybody wants to do that. So I think you can kind of hide a little bit more, call it, in a, let's say, a big corporate environment, you have 500 people at the company. It's like, yeah, they're going to have productivity KPIs and the manager, but there's a lot of people there that are probably like not operating at 100% capacity. Where I think if you're on a team of 8 people, you're a $2 million company, and it's like, okay, well, it's kind of obvious like who is making options smooth, they're making the
Yeah.
cash register ring. And so I think it's really important to um, uh, think about the environment that these people are coming into too. And one strategy I like is when you're looking to hire somebody, it's like you almost need to talk them out of the job, right? Like, you need to, hey, these are the parts that suck. Like, I think most hiring managers try to sell the job, which it is sales to get great people to come to your company. But I think, like any other sales, like if you overpromise, you're going to be in trouble because the people are going to get there and say, hey, this is like, you can't be selling Bain Capital environment if have 10 people 20 miles outside the city. It's like you're not in the top of the skyscraper. So you just need people that aren't looking for that. And there's plenty of them. And one lesson I've learned is that not, or like, for take something you don't like to do. Like, I don't like to do, computer work. Like, I like to, be on the phone, have conversations with people. But there's somebody out there who loves to do computer work. So, you just in that same vein, like, you need to find somebody who loves like the small business environment. It doesn't want to be the big corporate company. Like, they want to be valued as an individual, maybe not as a number in a, CRM system internally or something like that. So I think about that a lot. It's like you got to hire the right types of people to succeed in the environment, whatever your company is.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. I think that the mantra of there's no place to hide at our office, and everyone has a KPI that they own, is one that some people hate, and because they came from the 500 person, 5,000 person company, and there are plenty of places to hide, and other people get excited about. So finding the people that get excited about that is awesome.
I agree.
As far as, I know we're wrapping up here and coming on time soon. I think the last thing that I like to talk about, and you hit it honestly nail on the head with the first thing that you mentioned, talking about commission and cost structure, but I want to just dive a little bit deeper and see if you had any other insights. I know that when we were first getting ready to hire, a lot of US based people, we were looking at it from the point of view of, oh, well, let's find somebody who, is willing to be flexible. We'll give them a ton of upside, but it's going to come from like 5 different complex style, like, comp plans. And if they do this, there's a bonus. And if they do that, they get a percentage of profit, and like a lot of things like that. Have you ever experimented with, like, I guess call it atypical comp plans, or like set up a comp plan that you have seen totally fail? And is there a way that you have kind of course corrected how you are compensating employees going forward?
Yeah. So we've tried a bunch of different ones. Like I said, I think in order to get somebody comfortable enough to be able to go out there and sell. So if they're commission, they need to be able to, they're going to need to sell in order to make the amount of money they need. I think you're better off hiring less people, giving them a salary that gives them the ability to not be desperate on sales calls, right? Like, the desperation never sells. So I think if you're putting your salespeople in a position where they need to be desperate, I think that's not going to go well, especially over the long run. Now, if they have some sort of recurring commission over time, a salary can fade away, and then their commission will come in. But it kind of depends on what you're selling. What I've opted for is simplicity. And so what we do at Bold is like all our salespeople will have a salary that's good, and then they'll get something like 50% of the first month of a client's retaining fee. And so what that does is like it's very clear, like if I do X, I get Y. Right. And then the way that works for the company is we've just designed that in a way where if we sell the right way, customers will stay a long time, and the company will realize the long-term benefit of that, but the salesperson wins in the short term. And that is another piece of keeping people engaged, is like, if you have some commission that's, 18 months off into the future, it's like, that doesn't really work. Like, you can't spend a commission pool at the grocery store. You can't, make your car payment with that. So you need to find a way to get people money quickly when they perform. And I think when I was younger, and before I even had my own personal responsibility, I didn't value, like people want, like, money today is very important for people, right? And it's like not everybody is an entrepreneur and is like willing to be like, oh, I can wait 4 years to get, pay. Like, people don't have that luxury all the time. So that's the way I think about it, is how do I put the company in position to win, but get this person paid as fast as possible? And I think if you do that and you have something that's good that they can sell, I think people will be very happy to sell for you.
Yeah, not everyone has that delayed gratification gene. And I also
Yeah.
think I was talking to a buddy about it before because we want to set up some kind of profit sharing structure. And I think what I quickly learned is that my definition of the upside that I would want is very different of the upside that an employee would want. And so
Right.
it was a good learning for me. Barrett, this is awesome, man. I know we're coming up at time here. If people want to check out you, the work that you're doing, where can they go and find you?
Say mostly on Twitter at Barrett J O'Neil. That's where I post most of my stuff. So anything I learn, I'll share there.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for coming on the show today, and we'll chat soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.